Hey, America! It's election season, and you know what that means. Yard signs, political ads you want to throw your shoe at, and that weird feeling you get when you realize you only recognize half the names on the ballot. But hey, at least your vote counts, right? Well, that's where things get a little complicated. You see, the way we vote in America, from how districts are drawn to how we elect our president is, well, it's a bit of a mess. We're talking about gerrymandering and the Electoral College, two things that sound like they belong in a dusty history book, but actually have a huge impact on who gets elected and what laws get passed. Don't worry, we're going to break it all down for you without the complicated jargon and with plenty of diagrams. By the end of this, you'll be able to impress your friends at parties with your newfound knowledge of American electoral shenanigans. And more importantly, you'll understand why these issues matter and how they affect your life. Because here's the thing. In a democracy, every vote should count equally. But with gerrymandering and the Electoral College, that's not always the case. So buckle up, America, because we're about to dive into the wild world of U.S. elections. And trust us, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Let's start with gerrymandering, shall we? It sounds like something you'd catch from a public restroom, but it's actually way more insidious than that. In a nutshell, gerrymandering is when politicians manipulate the boundaries of voting districts to give their party an unfair advantage. Imagine a birthday cake. Now imagine you get to decide how to slice that cake, and you also happen to really love frosting. Would you cut the cake into equal slices, or would you try to sneak yourself an extra large piece with all the frosting on top? That's essentially what gerrymandering is, except instead of cake, we're talking about political power. The term itself dates back to 1812. When Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry signed a bill that created a ridiculously shaped district resembling a salamander, all to benefit his party. Thus, Gerry plus salamander equals gerrymandering. But here's the thing. Gerrymandering isn't just about funny shapes on a map. It's about silencing the voices of voters and undermining the very principles of democracy. It's about politicians choosing their voters instead of the other way around. So, how exactly does gerrymandering work? Well, it's all about manipulating the lines on the map, and there are two main techniques: cracking and packing. Cracking is like taking a cookie and breaking it into a bunch of tiny crumbs. You spread out the opposition party's voters across multiple districts, making sure they never have enough votes to win anywhere. Packing, on the other hand, is like shoving all the cookie crumbs into one giant messy pile. You cram as many of your opponent's voters as possible into a single district, giving them a landslide victory in that one area but ensuring they lose everywhere else. Now you might be thinking, but John, don't we have independent commissions to draw fair district lines? And in some states, yes, we do. But in many others, it's still the politicians themselves who get to decide how the districts are drawn. The result? Elections that are about as fair as a rigged carnival game. Voters who feel like their voices don't matter. Now, let's talk about the Electoral College, shall we? No, it's not a school for future politicians, although after learning about it, you might wish it were. The Electoral College is the system we use to elect the President of the United States, and it's about as straightforward as a game of Twister played in a hurricane. Here's the gist. Instead of directly electing the president through the popular vote, we vote for electors, who then cast their votes for president. Each state gets a certain number of electors based on its population, and in most states, it's a winner-take-all system. So if you win the popular vote in a state by even a tiny margin, you get all of that state's electoral votes. Now, the Electoral College was created at the Constitutional Convention back in 1787, and let's just say things were a little different back then. The Founding Fathers were worried about mob rule and wanted to create a system that gave more power to smaller states. But fast forward to today, and the Electoral College looks about as relevant as a rotary phone. Section 5. The electoral math problem, when the popular vote doesn't equal victory. Because of the winner-take-all system in most states, a candidate can win the presidency without winning the popular vote. Think back to the 2016 election. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes, but Donald Trump won the presidency because he secured more electoral votes. How is that possible, you ask? Well, it all comes down to the distribution of those electoral votes and the fact that Trump won a few key swing states by very narrow margins. This electoral math problem has happened 5 times in U.S. history, and it always leads to a whole lot of head-scratching and heated debate. Because let's be honest, it just doesn't seem right that a candidate can win the White House without winning the most votes. It's like winning a marathon by taking a shortcut through someone's backyard. Sure, you might cross the finish line first, but you didn't exactly play by the rules. And that, my friends, is a recipe for outrage and disillusionment. Section 6, 2000 and 2016. Echoes of Electoral Controversy. The 2000 and 2016 elections serve as stark reminders of the Electoral College's potential to throw a wrench into the gears of democracy. In 2000, the race between George W. Bush and Al Gore came down to a nail-biting finish in Florida, where a margin of just a few hundred votes ultimately decided the entire election. Bush won Florida and thus the presidency, despite losing the national popular vote to Gore. Fast forward to 2016, and history repeated itself, albeit with a different cast of characters. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by a significant margin, but Donald Trump's victory in several key swing states, including Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, secured him the presidency. These two elections sparked fierce debates about the Electoral College's continued relevance in the 21st century. Critics argue that it undermines the principle of one person, one vote, and that it gives disproportionate power to a handful of swing states. The debate rages on, with no easy answers in sight. Section 7. The Intertwined Fates of Gerrymandering and the Electoral College. Now, you might be wondering, what do gerrymandering and the Electoral College have to do with each other? They seem like separate issues, right? Well, not so fast. While they operate on different levels of the electoral system, they're more interconnected than you might think. Remember how gerrymandering can create safe districts for one party, even if that party doesn't win the popular vote nationwide? Well, those safe districts can influence the outcome of presidential elections by shaping the Electoral College map. Let's say a state has been heavily gerrymandered to favor one party in congressional elections. That party's dominance in congressional races might translate into an advantage in the presidential race as well, especially if the state uses a winner-take-all system for its electoral votes. Gerrymandering can create a distorted political landscape that influences not only congressional elections, but also the presidential race through the Electoral College. This interconnectedness highlights the complex web of factors that shape American elections and underscores the need for comprehensive electoral reform to ensure fairness and equal representation for all. Section 8, the Great Debate, Reforming the System. So, what can be done about all of this? Well, that's where the Great Debate comes in. Some people believe we should abolish the Electoral College altogether and elect the president by popular vote. They argue that it's the fairest system, where every vote counts equally, and the person with the most votes wins. Others argue that the Electoral College, while flawed, does serve a purpose by forcing candidates to campaign in different parts of the country and build broad coalitions. As for gerrymandering, many advocate for independent commissions to draw district lines instead of leaving it up to politicians. They argue that this would create fairer districts and reduce the influence of partisan politics in the redistricting process. The debate over electoral reform is complex and multifaceted, with valid arguments on both sides. But one thing is clear: the current system is far from perfect, and there's a growing chorus of voices calling for change. Section 9. Your voice, your vote. Be informed, be engaged. So where do we go from here? Well, that's where you come in. Because as much as we like to complain about the system, the truth is it's up to us, the voters, to demand better. The first step is to get informed. Read up on gerrymandering and the Electoral College. Understand how they work, how they affect your state, and what the arguments for and against reform are. Knowledge is power, and the more you know about these issues, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions. Next, get engaged. Talk to your friends, family, and neighbors about these issues. Contact your elected officials and let them know where you stand on electoral reform. Support organizations that are working to make elections fairer and more representative. Your vote is your voice, and it's one of the most powerful tools you have to create change. Because in the end, America, this isn't about Democrats or Republicans, it's about creating a system where every vote counts, where every voice matters, and where the government truly represents the will of the people.